Welcome into the install with Greg Cosell of NFL Films. A rare victory week for the Tennessee Titans, Greg. 31-29 over the Cleveland Browns, and an actually pretty entertaining football game. Fell off a little bit there in the third quarter, but they gave us, both teams, I thought, gave us a pretty good show.
Victory Monday, my man. You haven't had one of those in a while on the radio.
Yeah, it's just like just a blessed sigh of relief after, weeks upon weeks upon weeks. Because even the Arizona thing, Greg, I know they won at the end and Cam and Ridley made a couple of plays, but it feels wrong for me to call it a
It felt,
cheap win, but it
yeah,
wasn't
it,
a
it, it, it
real win.
this felt like a professional NFL win. Yeah. I'd be very curious just before we start talking about the game, like, not that anybody thinks they're all of a sudden a good team or, but what were your calls like on early in the week? Because I mean, hey, they won an NFL game and they didn't look bad doing it.
Yeah, and it's kind of a, fans go through this, right? When their teams
Right,
are obviously out of it and you start looking more towards draft and Senior Bowl and Combine and
right,
all that
right.
stuff. And I think just overwhelmingly like callers understood that like this is a young football team that needed a four-quarter winning performance
Right.
for them to start to build a foundation. Because no matter how many draft picks you have, Greg,
Yep.
it's not a guaranteed fix. And I think people kind of get
No.
caught up in that.
Right, right. Well, no, it's just, hey, it's nice to get a win. I'm sure it made a lot of people feel a lot better walking into the facility on Monday morning, and it makes the week better. Who knows what happens in the final four games, but it just makes this week a little better.
Well, and especially the way that they did it, Greg, because the
Yep,
offensive line and the running game have been a problem all year
all
long to
year.
some
Yeah,
degree. And in this game, Tony Pollard had a career high 164 on 25 attempts, two touchdowns. Obviously, he had the long two. And then as a team, they had 181 on the ground total. It was the best rushing performance by a mile that they've had all year. What
yeah.
did you see from the offensive
Well,
line in particular before we talk about the way that they neutralized Myles Garrett?
Well, first of all, it was clearly game plan to try to approach it that way. Now, again, they're not going to sit here and say we knew we'd run for 180. You can't say that. But they played 14 snaps with six O-line personnel. So this was clearly game plan. This wasn't just like a fluky thing that they happened to run well. I mean, that doesn't mean they're going to do this every week and run for 180 every week. That's not the way the league is. But this approach, as they game plan to play this defense, they clearly said, you know what, we're going to line up with big people. We're going to line up heavy. We're going to attempt to run the ball. They had a lot of runs where they lined up in what you'd call a five-man surface where they had five to one side. And they it's funny that when they did that, they often ran back to the weak side, but obviously you get the defense to slide to the strength of the formation. So I thought that that was their approach, and obviously it was effective. Look, you're not going to get a 65-yard touchdown run every week, but I guess it was a four-man surface they did it, and a five-man as well. But you're not going to get that every week. But still, they were able to sustain offense by running the football to a meaningful extent. And when you can do that, it changes the entire flow of the game on both sides of the ball.
Well, and it just allows a rookie quarterback to have margin for error, you know? I mean, because Cam played well enough in a team-winning performance, but we understand just how much he's been asked to do because of their inability to run the football so far this season, Greg. They've been a one-dimensional team almost the entire year long, and to finally
The
see complementary football made a huge difference for them.
I'm glad you said that because Ward through 13 games has the fifth most dropbacks of any quarterback in the NFL. Okay. That's the last thing you want from a rookie quarterback behind a poor pass protecting O line. That's essentially a recipe for, I don't want to say disaster, it's a strong word, for a lack of any kind of meaningful success. And the reason it's been that way has been the total inability to run the football. This team has been in either their second or third most third and 7+ downs of any team in the league. And that's just, that's tough for a veteran quarterback, much less a rookie quarterback who's still trying to figure it out. And playing with two rookie receivers, see, and a rookie tight end. All this factors in. I know, look, we all follow social media because that's our business to some extent these days. And you see a lot of the things about, well, Cam Ward's a bust. Look, none of us know what's going to happen with a new coaching staff next year. None of us can answer that. But it's such a silly thing to say at this point. We just have no idea. This is, I don't want to say it's been a dysfunctional year because that's probably too strong a word. But when you're asking your quarterback to drop back as much as he has behind a poor O line with no run game to counter at all and rookie receivers, you're not going to have days where you throw for 350 and 4 touchdowns. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and obviously not to make excuses, Greg. I think it's simply an explanation. He's played some really kick-ass defenses this entire
Yeah.
season long, be it and the Browns obviously with Myles Garrett didn't have quite the impact that we expected them, but the Niners, or rather the Seahawks, the Rams, the Colts when they were more healthy earlier in the year, the
Yeah.
Broncos, like they have had a bit of a gauntlet
And by the
here.
way, the Browns are a very good defense too.
Absolutely. It wasn't a bad day for them by any stretch of the imagination. But the thing that really stood out was the way that the Titans were able to, I wouldn't say anybody neutralizes Myles Garrett, but this is about as small of an impact as Myles Garrett
Yeah.
has had in an individual game all year long. Two pressures. He had one batted pass, three tackles. He had a sack and a hit in the game. They really did a good job both running at him and taking advantage of some of the opportunities that presented, and then trying to make sure that Cam got rid of the ball and got rid of and kept
Yeah.
the offense moving.
No question. I mean, they didn't really have deep drops where they asked either one of the tackles to block 101. They blocked 101 if it was quick drops and the ball was coming out, because then he's not going to get there. The sack you mentioned was a schemed sack, not a one-on-one matchup sack. He was actually an inside stand-up joker. He was basically lined up as a stand-up D tackle, and he was the looper in what we call a long stunt. So that was schemed. That was not him beating a tackle. But he was a non-factor in one-on-one situations because of the way they chose to play offense and the success they were able to have in the run game. And a lot of the runs, by the way, did go away from him.
Yes, they were fun. They were. I mean, anything that you can do to stay away from Myles Garrett would probably result in a better situation than not. And so Cam, he completes 50% of his passes. It's only 117 passing yards, but he does get the two touchdowns. Greg, they score on their opening possession for the first
First
time all
time this
season
year.
long as well, just to kind of continue to give themselves a little bit of the margin. He does throw an interception in this game, but I thought he wasn't very pleased with his own performance. I thought on the whole it was fine.
Well, don't forget there was the storyline of him versus Sanders, and
Sure.
Sanders did play very well in this game, clearly. I thought, obviously I watched the tape. I thought he played very well. So I'm sure he wanted Cam, that is, to play, better. And, he didn't in a strict sense, but, I thought they did some really, really good things as far as, um, how they played, how they chose to play. Now, granted, that has to be successful when you choose to play that way, and they did have success. But I thought, again, I'm sure this coaching staff, with your phone calls, obviously, I'm not listening to Nashville radio, but I'm sure that a lot of people have probably ripped the coaching staff. That just goes with losing. You know that. Coaches know that's the nature of the business. But very rarely do fans say, "Oh, the coaches did a great job." Even on good teams, fans rarely ever say that. And I thought they did some really good things in this game.
No, absolutely, and it was one of the first times, Greg. And again, I'm not qualified to judge this, and very few people are. And even somebody with your level of expertise, right? We talk about it all the time. We're not in the meeting room, so it's impossible
No,
for us to have the full scope. But I did feel that the coaching staff did an above average job putting them in positions to succeed
I
this
mean,
week.
even this Spears 24-yard screen reception on 3rd and 10 on the first possession. Again, we can sit here and say, gee, did they know they were going to get that particular coverage, and that they get that particular, look on defense? I don't know if they anticipated that, but the call turned out to be a terrific call against the pressure that they got and the coverage that they got. So again, that's the bottom line. That's what the tape shows. Like you said, we're not in the meeting, so we don't know if they said, "Hey, on our first 3rd and long, this is what we anticipate, so this is the call we're going to make." We don't. You and I don't know that, and fans don't know that.
Right.
But it turned out to be the perfect call against the pressure and the coverage that they got.
So now they'll try to do something that has been impossible for them. They haven't won back-to-back games, Greg, since November of 2022. Okay, so it's been quite some time.
Wow.
At home against the Broncos and then on the road at Green Bay on a Thursday night football game. So going to San Francisco, a 9-win football team who's still vying for their division, is no small
Yep.
feat. We know Niners coming off a bye and they've been dealing with injuries all year long. They're a little heavier on the pass than I thought they would be, Greg, and I'm sure that's not how Kyle Shanahan would prefer to play so far this season.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're still a running football team. I guess we don't know about Kyle Juszczyk at this point. He's critical to the way they play. They'd have to play differently because they play about 40% plus of 21 personnel, and Juszczyk is so critical as a motion player. And by the way, just a quick point to mention about the Titans, and these are the kinds of things you want to see developing as the season progresses. Buck, they featured more pre-snap movement versus the Browns than they had deployed in any previous game this season. And that's something that is sort of become the direction the league is moving. I mean, more than 68% of their offensive snaps had shifts and or motions, with 33 of those snaps featuring motion as the ball was snapped. And that's again, there's reasons why teams do it, and there's reasons why teams don't do it. So I'm not going to sit here and say they've made a mistake because they're playing with a rookie quarterback. And when you have a rookie quarterback, don't forget sometimes when you motion, you know what, the other team moves too. The
Yeah.
defense moves. And, maybe Cam, as they're developing him, maybe he was not comfortable with that. You don't know. Again, these are things we don't know, but it's just something that I noticed immediately watching the tape that, boy, there's more shifting in motion. And, in today's NFL, that tends to be a good thing as opposed to a bad thing. But
Yeah.
anyway, getting back to the Niners, the Niners are not really a big mystery and how they play. They want to run the ball with McCaffrey and the run game's multiple. And they've been up and down doing that this year in terms of their offensive line performance. And obviously, Purdy missed 5 games, if I'm not mistaken. But their pass game is very timing and rhythm based. So you have to defend that because they normally, unless it's a long yardage situation, they normally don't have a lot of deep drops. They normally are very timing and rhythm. He drops back, balls out, drops back, balls out. So you really have to defend the routes in those situations, the more normal down and distance situations, you have to defend the scheme more than you have to defend the quarterback. Does that make sense, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
because you're not going to get to the quarterback. Now you can on 3rd and 9 if there's deeper drops, but in normal down and distance situations with the rhythm of the pass game, you're not likely to get to the quarterback. So you have to defend the scheme and the concepts more than the quarterback.
Well, and the scheme has always been something, to your point, not necessarily complicated, but they're just so versatile from a
Yeah,
positional standpoint. And obviously, McCaffrey's taking the vast majority of his snaps out of the backfield, Greg, but they do deploy him in the slot quite a bit,
they sure
and
do.
he's going to be a matchup problem for the linebackers for Tennessee in particular. Should they get those matchups
Well,
on Sunday?
they're going to look, it's obvious. The Titans know this. The whole world knows it if you watch tape, and even fans know it because they can see it. They're going to try to look to get him matched up on Gray. I mean, look what happened last week with Gray on the Samson twice. And we've talked about the fact that Gray needs work as a pass defender. He's a very good run defender. Love the way he plays the run. I think that's something to build upon. You can look at him, I think, as a bit of a building block going forward, just like you can look at Kevin Winston as a building block going forward. He's played well, and you can see the traits. You can just see that he's that guy. He's long, he's big, he's physical, he's athletic. You can just see it. But we saw, last week, getting back to Gray, that, on those angle routes in the middle of the field, that's just hard for him. And Samson is not McCaffrey, so, that's the Niners will absolutely look to exploit that, and we'll see how it plays out.
So on the other side of the ball, we understand that San Francisco has had a critical amount of injuries there, especially to
Ah,
star players like Fred Warner and Nick Bosa earlier in the season. And they're not, by efficiency, Greg, they're not the best unit. They've allowed 23 touchdowns so far this season. But schematically, what is Robert Saleh trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I mean, they haven't rushed the quarterback great this year, and they've had their moments where they haven't stopped the run. Now, Salah's not a big blitz guy. Now, at times he will, and who knows? Look, they're coming off a bye week. That's when teams do, particularly this late in the season, have a bye. Teams do major self-scouting because there's a large enough sample where they can pretty much look at almost their whole season, Buck, and say, okay, this is what we've done well. These are the areas we really need to address. That's what the coaches did the first week of their bye. Obviously, this week they're game planning for the Titans, but the first week, I guarantee, knowing Kyle Shanahan too, because I know Kyle a little bit, that they've been, there were not a lot of days off, I would imagine. As they're fighting for a division title potentially, they're really doing self scouting, and so we'll see. Could they come out and be a little more pressure based? Perhaps. But don't forget, they're also playing with a second-year corner in Green, a Florida State kid who I really liked coming out, but he's a first-year full-time starter. And then they have Lenore at the other corner. And I would bet that if you got Robert Saleh with truth serum, he would tell you that Lenore is probably better suited to be a slot. But with the players they have, he had to be an outside corner this year, and they played the rookie Upton Stout at slot. He's done okay. They play a good amount of big nickel, which I would imagine you'll see a good amount of big nickel versus the Titans when they go with their heavy package. You know, and it's Pinnock who's the third safety, and he's essentially a box player when they do that. So I really like their safeties. I think Brown and Mustafa have played really, really well, and Mustafa in particular is kind of a missile playing downhill in the run game. But they don't rush the quarterback great. That's the other thing.
Well, certainly, as we talked about, like for the Titans in the run game on Sunday, it can happen in a one-game sample size. So we'll see what that looks like between the Niners and the Titans this coming weekend. Thursday Night Football, not exactly a barn burner. It's an NFC South divisional game, Greg, between the Falcons and the Bucks. But speaking of injury, I mean, Tampa Bay has just been, and there's plenty of teams dealing with injury late in the
Oof.
stretch, but the Bucks, I mean, they have just been a mash unit so far this season, and trying to get those three wide receivers on the field at the same time has seemed a near impossibility. I wonder what of the way that you've seen the Bucks kind of manage the situation, because not only are they dealing with personnel issues, but they lost their offensive coordinator to Jacksonville this year, and we haven't really
Yes.
talked about the Bucks offense because it started really
Well,
well at the start of the year, and since then they've just had a bit of a struggle.
Well, it's funny with quarterbacks, and again, you'd almost have to be there to get a sense of it. But what the tape shows when you watch Baker through the first four, five, six, whatever the number of games were that they played very well, boy, did he look decisive. He
Yeah.
looked like boom, get back, ball was coming out. Now he looks indecisive and hesitant, tentative, and none of us can speak to what's in his head, and maybe he's not comfortable. It's my understanding they might get Mike Evans back tonight. Is that your understanding?
Yes,
Um,
that's at least the reporting has indicated that's a possibility.
And that's a big deal for this reason, because he's their boundary X, meaning he's the single receiver to the short side of the field, more often than not on the back side of trips, meaning three receivers to the other side of the field. And you always feel comfortable as a quarterback working to that single receiver because he gets a lot of one-on-one coverage. And when it's Mike Evans, you feel, hey, I can throw him the ball. So maybe you'll see Baker be a little more decisive tonight, but he's just been so hesitant in the pocket. And once a quarterback, again, it's always easy to talk about, and it's great when I have my clicker and I can watch the play, 10 times. But when a quarterback's just not feeling comfortable and he knows that, he has 2.5 seconds probably at most, boy, do you start speeding up when you're not comfortable. And you can see that watching tape when guys just start speeding themselves up.
Yeah, especially him right now playing through injury again. It's just been a slog for Tampa.
Yep.
So we'll see what tonight looks like because the Falcons are not a bad defense. I don't know, James Pierce has
No,
been a solid player. I don't know if he
he's
was
been
worth
a
the
good
trade.
player.
Those things can be debated, Greg, but they've been a pretty decent unit.
He's a rookie, and he had some really good pass rushes last week against Charles Cross, who was a top 10 pick when he came out, 4 or 5 years ago. Pierce is. I watched their defense quite a bit because it's actually a very interesting defense, Buck, tactically. Jeff Ulbrich does a lot of things from a schematic pressure standpoint that are kind of fun to watch.
Yeah.
Um, and so I've seen a lot of Pierce, and yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say he's on his way to being Miles Garrett or anything like that, but he's had a pretty solid season. He's and you can see the traits. You see the size, you see the length, you see the traits. I would bet he'll end up again. I don't know the kid. You may know about it because it's Tennessee. I know there were some questions when he came out. I don't get into that as far as my evaluations, but it's there for him to develop into a good player.
Absolutely. There's all kinds of good games for the matchup show to break down this weekend. Of course, you can catch it early on Saturday mornings. You can catch it on ESPN Plus on demand. You can set your DVR to catch the NFL matchup show. Greg, what piece? I imagine that this Bills Patriots rematch is in the matchup show for
Yeah.
sure.
That's our part four game, which means it's a full segment game. So we do two film pieces. I do one, Darius does one. So that's our big full segment game. Um, there's a couple of games here that are kind of last chance you games that we're doing Chargers at Chiefs
Yeah.
and Ravens at Bengals. And the Bengals just beat them 2 weeks ago in Burrow's first game back, and Burrow was really good in that game. Burrow was actually really good last week too. Those two interceptions were very fluky. But other than that, I mean, they were just converting, it seemed, every third down.
Yeah.
He played very well. And then there's Lions at Rams, a huge game. Packers at Broncos, how good a game is that? And
Yeah.
then the Monday nighter, I believe, is it Monday night yet? Or is it Sunday night? Dolphins at Steelers. There's Monday night, Monday night. And let me tell you something. Obviously, the Steelers are in first place, but very quietly, the Dolphins have won four in a row. I don't even know if they're still, conceivably get a playoff spot if they win out, but I don't follow that just yet. But they've won four in a row. Their defense is, played pretty well. Anthony Weaver's done a hell of a job as a D coordinator, and A-Chain, and I know he had the rib injury, but nothing's broken, so you have to assume he's going. If it's not broken, they'll pad it up and he'll be okay. And he's the third leading rusher in the league, and their run game is really good.
Well, I was just going to ask you about that, Greg, because Mike McDaniel's obviously a curiosity for everybody in the league. When the GM gets fired,
Yeah.
it's always, easy to kind of wonder what the future of the coach will be. And certainly in Tennessee, they're looking at all manner of different offensive coordinator candidates. He has done a pretty kick-ass job with that run game. And I'm not saying that he's on the field executing, but at least putting
Right.
the players in position to succeed because Tua has not, I don't know what your evaluation of him in the last couple of weeks has been, but he has not necessarily helped them. They're doing a lot of that work on the ground.
He's been up and down, and he as we've discussed a number of times, he's a certain kind of player, and that's what he is. He's not really anything beyond what he is. But let me tell you something. People can we're not there, so we don't know how Mike McDaniel, you know, gets along and engages with everybody in the building, how he talks to the players. We don't know any of that. But I can tell you one thing. He's pretty much regarded by everybody in the league as a run game savant, as just a genius when it comes to the run game. And he was really the run game guy when he was with Kyle and with the 49ers. And he knows how to put together a run game. It's forever evolving and changing. He doesn't just say, "Hey, this is what we do, and that's what we do." He's very academic and when it comes to the run game, and he's really, really good at it. And they've obviously played well. Yeah, I don't know what that means for his job. That's not
Sure.
our discussion, but they're not an easy out right now.
No, and certainly they look like they might be at the start of the season, but that's why you let the games play out. Greg, a
Yeah.
pleasure as always, my friend. Thank you for the time. Enjoy the football this weekend. We'll do it again next Thursday.
All right. Thanks, Buck. Appreciate it.